the night the island went silent. If you think you've seen every kind of prison story, think again. Because what happened on Rikers Island that night wasn't just an escape. It was a statement. A message written in rain, steel, and silence. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button if you think you could survive a night inside America's most notorious island prison, because after this story, you might never want to see water again. The night was thick with fog, rolling off the East River like breath from something alive. Guards on the late shift leaned against concrete walls, half asleep, half frozen, believing no one could ever get off Rikers Island. The prison loomed like a fortress, razor wire glinting under yellow floodlights, towers rising like teeth against the skyline of New York. Inside, 7,000 inmates were locked away, each one dreaming of freedom they'd never touch. But one man wasn't dreaming. He was planning. Melvin Lattimore wasn't the kind of inmate that made noise. He worked in maintenance, kept his head down, and followed rules so perfectly it became suspicious. For months, he'd studied guard rotations, blind spots in the cameras, even the timing of the searchlights that swept across the perimeter fence. While others bragged about breaking out, Melvin was quietly building something real, a plan that could actually work. It started with garbage bags. He'd steal them one at a time from the janitor's closet, tucking them into his jumpsuit until he had enough to build what he called his wings. He filled them with stolen laundry to form air pockets, then tied them together with torn bed sheets. It wasn't pretty, but it would float. Every night, he hid the pieces behind the old plumbing shed, a part of the compound guards rarely checked. By midnight on July 9th, 1988, the island was quiet. A summer storm rolled in from the north, covering the prison in sheets of rain and thunder. It was the perfect night to disappear. Melvin slipped out of his cell during the maintenance shift, blending into the shadows like a ghost in orange. Cameras flickered under the lightning, static washing over the monitors. One by one, he moved through unlocked gates, the same gates guards had been bribed to forget to close properly. By 12:47 a.m., he was standing at the edge of the East River. The city lights shimmered in the distance, freedom just across the water. He inflated his makeshift raft, tied his jumpsuit tight around his chest, and pushed off into the current. The river was colder than he expected, biting into his skin with every stroke. The wind howled, the waves slammed against him, but he kept moving. Behind him, Rikers Island grew smaller, just a shape swallowed by fog and rain. By dawn, Melvin was gone. No alarms, no searchlights, no shouts, just silence. The island had been fooled. When the first head count came at sunrise, guards assumed it was a miscount. But when they reached Melvin's cell, they found only a neatly folded blanket and a note scrawled in pencil. "If Rikers is hell, then I just found the back door." The warden ordered an immediate lockdown. Helicopters swarmed the area. Police boats combed the river. And the press caught wind of the story before the guards even knew what hit them. But what no one knew, not yet, was that Melvin hadn't just escaped to prison. He had exposed a secret that could burn the entire system down. The man who outsmarted the island. By the time the morning sun broke over New York City, Rikers Island was in chaos. The warden's voice echoed through the corridors like thunder. "Lock down every block." Guards scrambled from cell to cell, sweat dripping down their collars as they realized the unthinkable had happened. A man had escaped from the most secure jail in America. Police helicopters circled the island, their blades chopping through the humid air. From above, the East River looked calm, but beneath that gray surface were deadly currents known to swallow boats, let alone a man on a garbage bag raft. Still, somewhere out there, Melvin Lattimore was alive, and the NYPD knew it. Within hours, the city went on alert. Every bridge, subway, and bus station in the Bronx was crawling with officers. Posters of Melvin's face, grainy and faded, were slapped onto walls and shop doors. The press labeled him the ghost of Rikers. Reporters swarmed the gates, demanding answers the Department of Corrections didn't have. How had one man outsmarted an entire prison island? Inside the warden's office, investigators found their first clue, a missing maintenance log. The timestamps had been altered. 2 guards who were supposed to be on duty had left their posts early, signing fake entries in the record. When questioned, both denied everything. But one of them, a rookie named Daniels, eventually cracked under pressure. He confessed that for months, small bribes had been exchanged for favors, extra yard time, relaxed checks, even tool access for inmates who behaved. It wasn't just one man's escape. It was a web of corruption that reached deep into the system. Meanwhile, 2 miles away in the Bronx, Melvin was hiding in an abandoned auto shop. His clothes were soaked, his skin raw from the river, but he was alive and grinning. He had done what everyone said was impossible. For 2 days, he scavenged for food and warmth, blending in with the city's shadows. He was free, but not invisible. On the 3rd day, his arrogance caught up with him. At a corner store, Melvin bragged to the clerk, "You're looking at the man who beat Rikers Island." The clerk laughed, then quietly called the police. When officers stormed the area hours later, they found Melvin sitting on a bench, smoking, calm as the tide. He simply said, "Took you long enough." But the arrest didn't end the story. It only opened the door to something far darker inside Rikers Island. The truth beneath the water. When Melvin Lattimore was returned to Rikers Island, the city exhaled, but not in relief. The public wasn't convinced. How could the most fortified jail in New York be breached by one man armed with garbage bags and nerve? The press demanded answers, and city officials were running out of lies. What they didn't know was that Melvin's escape was never about freedom. It was about exposure. In the interrogation room, Melvin sat shackled, his orange jumpsuit dripping river water onto the floor. Detectives leaned over the table, their questions sharp, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled and said, "You think I ran to get away? I ran to show you how broken your island really is." Over the next few days, internal investigators began uncovering layers of corruption buried deep within the Rikers system. Guard logs were falsified, surveillance cameras conveniently malfunctioned, and inmate records had been altered. Melvin's escape wasn't a spur-of-the-moment stunt, it was a test. He had spent months gathering evidence of brutality, smuggling letters to journalists through visiting attorneys, and watching the system rot from within. He wanted to prove that Rikers wasn't just a prison. It was a machine that fed on neglect. When the truth leaked, headlines exploded. Inside Rikers, the prison that let itself fall apart. Protests erupted outside City Hall. Former inmates came forward with stories of abuse, bribes, and suicides covered up as accidents. The Department of Corrections tried to contain the storm, suspending guards and promising reform, but the damage was irreversible. Meanwhile, Melvin became a silent symbol, part criminal, part whistleblower. Journalists painted him as both a villain and a messenger. The public couldn't decide whether to hate him or thank him. From his small, isolated cell, he watched the chaos unfold on a flickering television, his face lit by the pale blue light. Months later, a grand jury indicted several officers on charges of misconduct and evidence tampering. Rikers underwent one of the largest overhauls in its history, but for Melvin, the outcome was bittersweet. His sentence was extended, his freedom gone, yet he had accomplished what no inmate ever had. He'd made the world look at Rikers and see the truth. As he stared through the narrow slit of his cell window, watching the East River shimmer in the moonlight, Melvin whispered, "You can lock me up, but you can't cage the truth." The water outside rippled, dark and endless, the same river that had once carried him toward freedom, now carrying his story across the world. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.